Chapter number 16, Sustainable Management of Natural Resources. Living in harmony with nature is not new to us. Sustainable living has always been an integral part of India's tradition and culture. It has been integrated with our long-lasting traditions and practices, customs, art and crafts, festivals, food, beliefs, rituals, and folklore. Ignored within us is the philosophy that the entire natural world be in harmony, which is reflected in the famous prayer in Sanskrit, Vasudev Kutumbakram. That means the entire earth is one family. The prayer is mentioned in Mahapanishad, that is probably a part of the ancient Indian text, Atharva Veda. In previous class, we learnt about some natural resources such as soil, air, and water, and how different components are cycled over and over again in nature. In 11th chapter, we also studied about the pollution of these resources because of some of our activities. In this chapter we shall study about some of our resources and how we are using them, how we should use our resources so as to conserve the resources and sustain our environment. We shall be looking at our natural resources like forests, wildlife, coal, water, and petroleum, and see what are the uses at stake in deciding how these resources are to be managed for sustainable development along with the input from our traditional practice. We often read or hear about environmental problems. These are often global level problems, and we feel helpless to produce any changes. There are international laws and regulations, and then there are our own national acts and laws for environmental protection. There are also national and international organizations working for protecting our environment. Awareness about the problems caused by recklessly exploiting our resources has been a fairly recent phenomenon in our society, and once this awareness rises, some action is normally taken. You must have heard about the Ganga Action Plan, a multi-crore project that came about in 1985 because the quality of the water in the Ganga was so poor. Coliform is a group of bacteria present in human intestines which presence in water shows the contamination by disease causing microorganisms. As you can see, there are some measurable factors which are used to quantify the quality of the water or pollution that we use for different activities. Some of the pollutants are harmful even when present in less quantities, and we need sophisticated equipment to measure them. But as we studied in chapter 2, the pH of water is something that can be checked easily by using universal indicator. But we need not to feel overwhelmed or powerless by the scale of the problems, because there are many things we can do to make a change. You must have come across the 5 R's to save and conserve the environment: refuse, reduce, recycle, repurpose, and reuse. What do they mean? What do they mean? Refuse, this means to say no to things people offer you that you don't need. Refuse to buy products that can harm you and the environment. Say no to single-use plastic carry bags. Reduce, this refers that you use less. You save electricity by switching off unnecessary fans and lights. You save water by repairing taps leakage. You do not waste food. Can you think of the other things that you can reduce the consumptions? Recycle, this means that you collect plastic. paper, metal, and glass atoms and recycle this material to produce required things instead of synthesis or exacting fresh plastic, paper, metal, or glass. In order to recycle, we first require to segregate our waste so that the substances that can be recycled is not dumped along with other waste. Does your village along a town city have a mechanism in place for recycling these substances? Repurpose. This means when a product can no more be used for the original purpose. Think carefully and use it for some other useful purpose. For example, cracked crockery or cups with broken handles can be used to grow small plants and as feeding vessels for birds. Reuse this is actually even better than recycling because the process of recycling consumes some energy. In the reuse strategy, you normally use things again and again instead of throwing away you used envelopes. You can use it and reverse it again. The plastic the plastic bottles in which you buy various food items like pickle or jam can be used for storing things in the chicken. What other times can we reuse? But even while making everyday choice, we can take environment friendly decisions. For doing this, we require to know more about how our choices affect the environment. These effects may be immediate or long ranging or long term. The concept of sustainable development encourages forms of growth that meet current basic human requirements while preserving the resources for the requirements of future generations. Economic development is related to environmental conservation. Thus, sustainable development implies a charge in all aspects of life. It is based on the willingness of the people to change their perceptions of the socio-economic and environmental conditions in their surrounding and the readiness of each individual to alter their present use of natural resources. Why do we need to manage our resources? Not just buildings and roads, but all the things we use or consume: food, clothes, books, toys, furniture, vehicles, and tools are obtained from resources on this earth. The only thing we obtain from outside is energy, which we receive from the sun. Even this energy is produced by living organisms and various chemical and physical processes on the earth before we make use of it. Why do we need to use our natural resources carefully? Because these are limited, and with the human population increasing at a tremendous rate due to health care improvement measures, the demand for all resources is increasing at an exponential rate. The management of natural resources needs a long-term perspective so that they will last for the generations to come and merely will not be exploited to the hilt for short-term gains. This management should also ensure equal distribution of resources so that all and not just a handful of powerful and rich people benefit from the development of these resources. Another chief factor to be considered while we exploit these natural resources is the damage we cause to the environment while these resources are either used or extracted. For example, meaning results in the pollution because of the large amount of slag which is discarded for every ton of metal extracted. Hence, stable natural resource management demands the planning for the safe disposal of these wastes too. The present day global concerns for sustainable development and conservation of natural resources are of recent origin as compared to the long tradition and culture of nature conservation in our country. Principles of conservation and sustainable management were well established in the prehistoric India. Our ancient literature is full of such examples where values and sensitivity of humans towards nature was glorified, and the principle of sustainability was established at its best. Observe various traditional practices for conservation of nature in your day-to-day life. Share within the peer group, make a report and submit. During the Vedic period, both productive as well as protective aspect of forest vegetation were embraced. Agriculture emerged as a dominant economic activity during the later Vedic period. This was the time when the concept of cultural landscape such as scattered forests and groves, scattered corridors, and a variety of ethnoforestry practice were evolved that continued through the post Vedic period. Besides, a wide range of ethnoforestry practices were infused with the traditions, customs, and rituals, and flowed as a means for protection of nature and nature resource. Forests and wildlife. Forests are biodiversity hotspots. The measure of the biodiversity of an area is the number of species present there. However, the range of various life forms, bacteria, fungi, ferns, nematodes, flowering plants, insects, reptiles, birds, and so on is also important. One of the main aims of conservation is to try and preserve the biodiversity we get inherited. Field studies and experiments suggest that a loss of diversity may lead to a loss of ecological stability. We all use different forest produce, but our dependency on forest resources differs. Some of us have access to alternatives, some do not. When we think about the conservation of forests, we need to look at the stakeholders who are the people who live around or in forests are dependent on forest produce for various aspects of their life. The forest department of the government, which owns the land and controls the natural resources obtained from forests. The industrialists from those who use tendu leaves to make beads to the ones with paper mills we use different forest produce but are not dependent on the forest in any one area. The nature and wildlife enthusiasts who want to conserve nature in its pristine form. Let us take a look at what each of these groups requires gets out of the forest. The local people require large quantities of firewood, a small timber, and thatch. They use bamboo to make slats for huts and baskets for collecting and storing food materials. Implements for agriculture, hunting, and fishing are largely made of wood. Also, forests are sites for hunting and fishing. In addition to people gathering nuts, fruits, and medicines from the forests, their cattle also graze in forest areas or feed on other fodder which is gathered from forests. Do you think such a use of forest resources would cause the exhaustion of these resources? Do not forget that before the British arrived and took over a maximum of our forest areas, people had been living in these forests for centuries. They had developed a practice to make sure that the resources were consumed in a sustainable manner. After the British took control of the forests, which they developed ruthlessly for their own purposes, the people were persuaded to depend on much smaller areas, and the forest resources started becoming cover exploited to some extent. The forest department in independent India took over from the British, but local needs and local knowledge continued to be ignored in the management practice. Thus, vast tracts of forests have been changed to monocultures of pine, eucalyptus or teak. In order to plant these trees, yoke areas are first cleared. This restores a large amount of biodiversity in the area. Not only this, the variety requirements of the local people, lives for fodder, fruits and nuts for food, herbs for medicines can no longer be met from the forest. Such plantation are useful for the industry to assess particular products and are an important source of revenue for the forest department. Do you know how many industries depend upon forest produce? A short count reveals timber, like paper and sports equipments. Industries industry would think about the forest as merely a source of a raw material for its factories, and you interest groups lobby the government for access to these raw materials at artificially low rates. As these industries have a greater reach than the local people, they are not interested in the sustainability of the forest in one specific area. For example, after cutting down and consumption of all teak trees in one area, they will get their take from a forest further away. They do not have any stake in ensuring that one particular area should produce an optimal about amount of some produce for all generations to come. What do you think? What do you think will stop the local people behaving in an equipment manner? Lastly, we come to the wildlife and the nature enthusiasts. We are in no way dependent on the forests, but who may have a considerable say in their management. The conservationists were essentially taken up with large animals like lions, tigers, rhinoceros, and elephants. They now recognize the need to conserve biodiversity as a whole, but it should not be recognize people as making basic part of the forest system. There have been enough instances of local people working traditionally for conservation and preservation of forests. For example, take the case of the Bisoni community in Rajasthan, for whom conservation of wildlife and forest has been a religious need. The government of India has recently instituted an Amrita Devi Bisoni National Award for Wildlife Conservation in the memory of Amrita Devi Bisoni, who in 1731 sacrificed her life along with 363 people for saving the khejri trees in Khejrali village near Jodhpur in Rajasthan. Studies have represented that the prejudice against the traditional use of forest areas has no basis in fact. Take an example. The Great Himalayan National Park have within its reserved area alpine meadows which were grazed by sheep in summer. Every summer. Nomadic birds drove their flock up from the valleys. When this national park was built, this practice was put to an end. Now it is observed that without the regular grazing by sheep, the grass first grows very tall and then falls over, preventing fresh growth from below. Management of protected areas for keeping the local people out by using force cannot be successful, possibly in the long run. In any case, the damaging of a forest cannot be attributed to only the local people. One cannot ignore the deforestation caused by industrial needs or development projects like building dams or roads. The damage caused in these rivers reserves by tourists or the arrangements made for their convenience is also to be supposed. We have to accept that human intervention has been has been very much a part of the forest landscape. What has to be managed is the text of this intervention, and the nature forest resources ought to be consumed in a manner that is both developmentally and environmentally sound. In other words, while the environment is preserved, the benefits of the controlled which decentralized ecological conservation and economic growth go hand in hand. The kind of economic and social development we want will finally determine whether the environment will be conserved or further distracted. The environment must not be regarded as a pristine aggregation of plants and animals. It is a complex and vast entity that offers a range of natural resources for our use. We need to use these resources with due caution for our social and economic growth and to fulfill our material aspirations. Management of forests. We need to think if the goals of all the above stakeholders with regard to the management of the forests are the same. Forest resources are often made available at rates far below the market value for industrial use, while these are donated to the local people. The Chipko Andolan had the trees movement was the result of a grassroots level attempt to end the alienation of people from their forests. The movement originated from an incident in a remote village named Reni in Garhwal, high up in the Himalayas in early 1920s. There was a dispute between a logging contractor and the local villagers who had been allowed to fell trees in a forest close to the village on the particular day when the main folk were absent. The contractors workers came in the forest to cut the trees. Undaunted, the women of the village quickly reached the forest and clasped the tree trunks, thus stopping the workers from cutting the trees. The contractor had to withdraw. Inherent in this type of competition to control a nature resource is the prevention of a reprehensible resource. Specifically, the method of use was being called into question. The contractor would have cut the trees, destroying them forever. The communities traditionally pluck the leaves and lop the branches, allowing the resource to replenish over time. The Chipko movement quickly spread across communities and media, and pressured the government, to whom the forest belongs to rethink their priorities in the use of products of forest. Experience has taught people that the destruction of forest affected not just the availability of products of forest, but also the quality of soil and the sources of water. Contribution of the local people can indeed lead to the efficient management of forests. An example of people's participation in the management of forests in 1907 to 72. In 1972, the West Bengal Forest Department recognized its failures in reviewing the degraded sal forest in the southwestern districts of the state. Traditional methods of policing and surveillance had led to a complete alienation of the people from the administration, resulting in frequent clashes between villagers and forest officials. Forest and land related conflicts in the region were also the important and main factor in fueling the militant present movements led by the Naxalites. According to this, the department changed its strategy, making a starting in the Arbory Forest range of Mindapur district. Her villagers were involved in the production of 1,272 hectares of badly degraded salt forest at the instance of a far-seeing forest officer, A.K. Banjir, A.K. Banerjee. In return for help in production, villagers were given employment in both harvesting operations and silviculture. 25% of the final harvest and allowed fodder and fuel wood collection on payment of a nominal fee with the active and willing contribution of the local community. The salt forests of Alberic underwent a remarkable recovery by 1983. A previously with worthless forest was valued rupees 12.5 crores. Water is a basic requirement. Water is a basic requirement for all terrestrial forms of life. We have learned in class 9 about the importance of water as a resource, the water cycle, and how human activity pollutes the water bodies. However, human intervention also changes the water availability in different regions. After the above activity, would you be very surprised to study that areas of water scarcity are closely related to the areas of acute poverty. A study of patterns of rainfall. A study of patterns of rainfall does not reveal the whole truth behind the water availability in different regions in India. Rains in India are largely because of the monsoons. This shows that most of the rainfalls occur only in a few months of the year. Despite nature's monsoon bounty failure to maintain water availability has resulted largely from the loss of vegetation cover, diversion for crop demanding high water, and pollution from urban wastes and industrial influence and irrigation methods like dams, tanks, and canals have been used in different parts of India since ancient times. These were normally local interventions managed by local people and assured that the basic minimum needs for both agriculture and daily requirements were met throughout the year. The use of this stored water was strictly regulated, and the optimum cropping patterns depend upon the availability of water were arrived at on the basis of centuries, decades of experience. The maintenance of the irrigation systems was also a local affair. The arrival of the British changed these systems as it changed various other things. The consumption of large-scale projects, large canals and dams traversing large distances were first implemented and convened by the British and carried on with no less gusto by our newly made independent government. These mega projects led to the neglection of the local methods of irrigation, and the government also increasingly took over the administration of these systems, causing the loss of control over the local water sources by the local people dams. Why do we seek to construct dams? Large dams can storage of adequate water not only for irrigation but also for producing electricity, as discussed in the chapter 15. In chapter 15, canal systems leading from these dams can carry large amounts of water at great distances. For example, the Indira Gandhi Canal has brought greenery to considerable regions of Rajasthan. However, mismanagement of the water has largely led to the benefits being cornered by a few people. There is no equal distribution. There is no equal distribution of water. Thus, people near to the source grow water-intensive crops such as sugarcane and rice, while people further from the downstream do not get any water. The words of these people who have been promised benefits which never arrived are added to the discontentment among the people who have been displaced by the construction of the dam and its canal network. In chapter 15, we mentioned the reasons for the opposition against building large dams like the Tehri dam on the Ganga River. You must have studied about the protests by the Narmada Bachao Andolan, Save the Narmada movement, about increasing the height of the Sada Sarovar dam on Narmada River. A criticism about large dams address three problems in particular. social problems because they displace large number of tribals and peasants without adequate rehabilitation or compensations. Economic problems because they slough up large amounts of public money without the production of proportionate benefits. Environmental problems environmental problems because they add to enormous deforestation and the loss of biodiversity diversity diversity. The people who have been displaced by different development projects are largely poor travelers who do not receive any benefits from these projects and are alienated from their forests and lands without adequate compensations. The ostriches of the Tawa Dam, built in the 1920s, are still fighting for the promised benefits. Water harvesting, waste management embraces scientific water and oil and soil conservation to increase the biomass production. The aim is to produce primary resources of water and land, to develop secondary resources of animals and plants for use in a manner which will not cause ecological imbalance. Of watershed management not only increases the income and production of the watershed community, but also mitigates droughts and floods and encourage the life of the downstream. Reservoir and dams. Different organizations have been working on rejuvenating ancient systems of water harvesting as an alternative to the mega projects such as dams. These communities have used hundreds of indigenous water-saving methods to capture each water trickle that had fallen on their land. Dug lakes and small pits, put in place simple watered systems, built a small earthen dams, built dikes limestone and sand reservoirs, set up water collecting units. This has increased groundwater levels and even brought rivers back to life. Water harvesting is an age-old concept in India. Khadins, nadis and tanks in Rajasthan, tals and bandras in Maharashtra, Buddhish in Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, Panions and ahars in Bihar, in Himachal Pradesh, ponds in the Kadi belt of Jammu, and in Kerala are some of the ancient water harvesting involving water conveyance structures still in use today. See figure. Water harvesting techniques are highly local specific and the benefits are also localized, providing people control over their local water resources. It ensures that overexploitation and mismanagement of these resources is reduced. In a largely level terrain, the water harvesting structures are chiefly crescent-shaped earthen emergence or low. A state concrete and rubble check dams constructed across essentially flooded gullies. Monsoon rains fulfill the ponds behind the structures. Only the largest structures can have water year around. Most dry up 6 months or less after the monsoons. However, their main purpose is not to hold water present at the surface but to recharge the ground water beneath. The advantage of stored water in the ground are many. It does not evaporate but spreads out to recharge wells and gives moisture for vegetation over a wide range of land. In addition, it does not provide breeding grounds for mosquitoes such as stagnant water collected in ponds or artificial lakes. The groundwater is also relatively protected from contamination by animal and human waste, coal and petroleum. coal and petroleum. We have noticed that some of the issues involved in the conservation and sustainable use of resources such as forests, wildlife, and water. This can meet our requirement potentially if we were to use them in a sustainable or controlled manner. Now we come to yet another important resource, fossil fuels. This is petroleum and coal, which are the important sources of energy for us. Since the industrial revolution, we have been consuming increasing amounts of energy to fulfill our basic requirements and for the manufacture of a large number of things upon which our lives depend. These energy requirements have been largely met by the reservoirs of petroleum and coal. The management of this energy source involves a slightly different ways from those resources discussed earlier. Petroleum and coal were formed from the decomposition of biomass millions of years ago, and so these are the resources that will get finished in the future, no matter how carefully we use them. And then we would need to look for alternative energy sources. It is estimated that if the present rate of consumption continues, our known petroleum resources will last for about 40 years, and the coal resources will last for another 200 years. But looking to other sources of energy is not the only consideration when we look at the consumptions of petroleum and coal. Since petroleum and coal have been formed from biomass, in addition to carbon, these contain hydrogen, sulfur, and nitrogen. When these are burnt, the products are carbon dioxide, water oxides of sulfur, and nitrogen. When combustion occurs in insufficient air oxygen, then carbon monoxide is produced instead of carbon dioxide on these products. The oxides of nitrogen and sulfur and carbon monoxide are poisonous at high concentration, and carbon dioxide is a green gas. Another way of looking at petroleum and coal is that they are large reservoirs of carbon, and if all of these carbon is changed to carbon dioxide, then the amount of carbon dioxide in the air will increase, resulting in the intense global warming. Thus, we require to use these resources judiciously. Some simple choice can make a difference in our energy utilization patterns. Think over the relative advantage and improvement friendliness of the following: taking a bus, using your personal vehicle or cycle, walking, using fluorescent tubes or LED bulbs in your homes, using the lift or the stairs, using a heating device, or wearing an extra sweater on cold days. The management of petroleum and coal also address the efficiency of our mechanism. Fuel is generally used in internal combustion engines for transportation, and recent research in this field concentrates on ensuring complete combustion in these engines to increase efficiency and also reduce air pollution. An overview of nature resources management. Sustainable management of nature resources is a difficult work. In addressing this issue, we require to keep an open mind with regard to the interest of different skilled stakeholders. We require to accept that the people will act with their own best interest as the priority, but the realization that such selfish goals will result in the misery for a large number of people, and a complete destruction of our environment is growing slowly, going beyond laws, rules, and regulation. We require to tailor our requirements collectively and individually, so that the benefits of development reach everyone now and for all generations to come.